that was coming. I saw that coming a mile away.
Okay.
All because of who he was, who he is, and who he's the son of.
Right.
And
when a Hall of Fame voice decides he has seen enough, people in football circles pay attention. Emmitt Smith, the NFL's all-time leading rusher, a 3-time Super Bowl champion, and one of the most respected figures the game has ever produced, is not a man who speaks carelessly. His legacy was built on consistency, discipline, and performance at the highest level of professional football. He played in an era where every carry, every fumble, and every missed block was dissected on national television. He understands scrutiny. He understands pressure. He understands what it means to perform under a microscope that never turns off. So when Emmitt Smith stepped forward to address the treatment of Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders, his words did not land quietly. They landed with the full weight of a career that earned the right to speak. Smith watched Shedeur's journey from the very beginning. At Jackson State, people dismissed the program without a second thought. The attitude was simple. Ah, that's Jackson State. Blah, blah, blah. The talent on the field did not matter nearly as much as the name on the stadium. When Shedeur transferred to the University of Colorado Boulder, the doubts followed him there too. Critics shifted the dismissal from the school to the conference, questioning whether the level of competition justified the national attention surrounding him. But Shedeur kept throwing. He kept delivering under pressure. He kept standing in the pocket behind an offensive line that gave up an enormous number of sacks, absorbing hits and still finding receivers downfield with accuracy that the numbers confirmed. His performance under those circumstances was not incidental. It was a sustained demonstration of toughness across an entire college career at 2 different programs. Smith made it clear he saw every stage of that journey. As he stated directly, I saw that coming a mile away because of who he was, who he is, and who he's the son of. That statement was not about entitlement. It was about recognition. The recognition that a player who performed the way Shedeur performed, at the level of visibility he performed at, was always going to be a significant figure when NFL draft season arrived. And when that draft arrived, Shedeur Sanders was by any reasonable measure the most marketable player in the entire class. No other prospect in that draft generated the same national conversation, the same media coverage, or the same public interest. His name moved the needle in ways that extended beyond pure football evaluation. Then came draft day 2025, and Smith's frustration became impossible to contain. Despite everything, the production, the toughness, the preparation, the national profile, Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round. Smith did not search for diplomatic language. There's no way he should have fell to the 5th round. No way. No way. He was completely disappointed in how the NFL handled the situation. This was not a player who arrived at the draft process underprepared or untested. Shedeur was trained by Jeff Blake, a former NFL quarterback, which means his football education included a professional foundation that most college prospects never receive. Working with Blake gave him access to the kind of technical quarterback development, footwork, throwing mechanics, reading coverages at a professional level that typically only arrives after years inside an NFL system. Beyond the technical training, Deion Sanders personally ensured that Shedeur understood defensive formations, body language reads, and the mental composure required to process information at the speed the professional game demands. Smith pointed to these facts specifically. I know that this kid was trained by an NFL quarterback himself, and I know that this kid understands defense because his dad had to help him understand what was happening. To argue that the fall to the 5th round had nothing to do with readiness. A player with that preparation background falling past every team in the first 4 rounds of the draft is not a football decision that explains itself cleanly. What made the fall even harder to justify was the comparison sitting right beside it. Baker Mayfield was celebrated for his brashness. Analysts praised his competitiveness. His outspoken personality was framed as a leadership quality that would translate directly into an NFL locker room. Johnny Manziel received similar treatment. His personality was embraced. His confidence was amplified, and the football world leaned into his outspoken nature as part of his appeal. Both quarterbacks were patted on the back for traits that in Shedeur Sanders' case were turned into question marks. He just plays with a chip on his shoulder. Some people would have got a pat on their back. The difference between a chip on your shoulder being labeled as drive versus being labeled as a red flag comes down entirely to who is carrying it. And that inconsistency is exactly what Smith identified as the problem. Smith has never argued that quarterbacks should avoid scrutiny. He knows the position receives more evaluation than any other in professional football. Every prospect gets questioned. Every coach gets evaluated. That is part of the game, and he has said as much clearly. But there is a documented difference between standard evaluation and a sustained narrative campaign, and throughout draft season, the criticism of Shedeur followed a pattern that moved well past standard territory. Anonymous scouts submitted quotes to major outlets questioning whether he held the ball too long. Analysts on ESPN and NFL Network returned daily to his sack totals at Colorado, treating those numbers as a character flaw rather than a structural problem created by a struggling offensive line. The framing matters enormously in professional football evaluation. When other quarterbacks play behind offensive lines that cannot hold their blocks, the national conversation centers on scheme adjustments, coordinator decisions, and system context. The quarterback is discussed as a talent operating in a difficult environment. When Shedeur faced those exact same circumstances, the question did not center on the system. It shifted directly to whether his play style could survive NFL Sundays. In his view, those traits should not automatically become red flags. That shift in framing, from systemic analysis to personal doubt, is the imbalance Smith has been calling out consistently. The yes, but cycle became the defining feature of how national media covered Shedeur's draft profile. Yes, he is talented, but is he elite? Yes, he is poised, but can he adjust to NFL speed? Yes, he showed toughness, but the sack numbers. Those questions, asked once inside a legitimate scouting context, are fair. That is draft evaluation functioning the way it is supposed to function. But when those same questions repeat across every major platform, every debate segment, and every mock draft cycle for months on end, they stop being evaluation and start being narrative construction. Smith has expressed this concern directly. When a single skeptical quote can turn into a week-long storyline, the process has moved away from football and into something else entirely. Repetition builds belief in a media environment that runs on engagement. A cautious anonymous scouting report becomes 2 articles. 2 articles become a debate segment. A debate segment generates social media reactions. Those reactions feed back into the next day's programming. By the time Shedeur Sanders arrived at any private team meeting during the pre-draft process, a version of his story had already been told hundreds of times, and that version leaned toward doubt. Before a rookie snap is taken, expectations can already tilt negative simply because debate segments need strong angles. That is not football analysis. That is media economics, operating at the expense of a player's professional reputation. Emmitt Smith's frustration does not come from blind loyalty to the Sanders name. It comes from experience inside a league that he knows intimately. He played at the top of the sport for over a decade. He knows exactly how public opinion shapes opportunity, and how perception, once hardened, becomes difficult to reverse, regardless of what the tape actually shows. His message on Shedeur has been the same from the beginning. Judge the throws, judge the reads, judge the toughness demonstrated over 2 college programs against real competition. The film exists. The numbers exist. The preparation is documented. Everything else, the noise, the narratives, the anonymous quotes, is exactly that. Noise. Section 2. Deion Sanders, the media machine and what Emmitt Smith is really saying. Deion Sanders is not a figure who arrived at college football quietly, and he never intended to. When he accepted the head coaching position at Jackson State and later moved to the University of Colorado Boulder, he did not bring a traditional playbook for rebuilding a program. He brought cameras inside the facility. He used social media as a direct communication channel to recruits, fans, and the national audience simultaneously. He bypassed the traditional media gatekeepers who had controlled the narrative around college football programs for decades. He reshaped what a rebuild was supposed to look like, and he did it loudly, visibly, and on his own terms. Within 2 years at Colorado, he produced a winning record and a bowl game appearance from a program that had been struggling at the bottom of the Pac-12 for years. He signs a new contract that's worth more than what a lot of coaches are making in the NFL, and that contract was not handed to him based on personality. It reflected measurable results produced inside one of college football's most challenging environments. The results at Colorado are not debatable. Deion Sanders inherited a program that won a single game the season before his arrival. He used the transfer portal aggressively, brought in talent from across the country, and immediately shifted the national conversation around a school that had largely fallen off the radar of serious college football discussion. The program's 2023 season generated more media coverage and game day attention than most NFL franchises were receiving at the same time. That level of visibility did not happen accidentally. It happened because Deion Sanders understood branding, understood communication, and understood how to connect a football program to a national audience in a way that traditional coaching methods had never achieved at Colorado. Deion Sanders is the only human being to ever play in a World Series and a Super Bowl. He won 2 rings. His background gave him a platform that no other college coach in the country possessed, and he used every part of it. But in traditional football circles, disruption rarely arrives without friction. The NFL ecosystem, and by extension, the broader professional football culture that shapes how coaches and players are evaluated, is built on decades of institutional hierarchy, legacy scouting departments with established protocols, long-standing front office structures where credibility is accumulated slowly through years of quiet service, a cultural expectation that coaches earn their visibility gradually through wins accumulated over many seasons inside the system, before they are granted the kind of national platform that Deion Sanders commanded from the moment he walked onto a sideline. Deion did not wait for that permission. He did not apply for institutional validation. He built his own spotlight without asking anyone's approval. And that confidence, the exact same confidence that made him the most dominant defensive back the NFL has ever seen as a player, made certain traditional voices deeply uncomfortable the moment he stepped into coaching. The public criticism maintained a professional surface. Can his style translate? Is the approach sustainable over multiple seasons? Is the environment too player-friendly to develop NFL-ready discipline? Those were the questions that circulated on panels at ESPN, Fox Sports, and NFL Network throughout Deion's time at Colorado. Taken individually, each question is legitimate. Coaching transitions from player to sideline carry real challenges, and the college-to-pro translation is a genuine area of evaluation for any coach aspiring to work at the professional level. But Emmitt Smith recognized that those professional-sounding questions were often carrying a deeper tension underneath them, a tension about control, about image, and about who gets to define what legitimate football leadership looks like in the modern era. Disruption in football culture is rarely embraced quietly. That sentence captures the environment Deion Sanders stepped into precisely. Emmitt Smith understood this tension at a level that most commentators cannot access, because he shared an era with Deion on the field. They competed at the highest level of professional football simultaneously. Smith watched the preparation behind the personality firsthand. He saw what Deion invested in his craft as a player, the study, the discipline, the competitive obsession that produced 2 Super Bowl rings and a Pro Football Hall of Fame induction. When Smith defends Deion's coaching credibility, it is not blind loyalty. It is informed testimony from someone who witnessed the foundation being built in real time. Smith's position has been consistent throughout. Reducing Deion's impact at Colorado to hype and cameras ignores the structural work involved in recruiting elite transfer talent, rebuilding a program's culture from the ground up, managing the expectations of a nationally watched roster, and consistently developing players who perform on Saturdays. Coaching at a high level requires more than camera presence, and the results at Colorado support that argument with documented facts. Reducing Deion's impact to hype overlooks the structural effort involved. Smith has also drawn a direct line between how Deion was treated as a player and how he is being treated as a coach. As a player, Deion Sanders operated entirely on his own terms. He said exactly what he felt. He carried himself with a confidence that the football world was forced to accept, because his performance on the field made the conversation impossible to dismiss. Deion was his own man. He said how he felt. He did what he wanted to do. He survived the plantation. That independence, the refusal to shrink or seek approval from institutional power structures, defined his playing career. Now that he has taken that same independence into a coaching role and built something real with it, the reaction from certain corners of football media has carried the same underlying discomfort that followed him as a player. The target shifted, but the tension remained identical. The media ecosystem surrounding both Sanders amplified every critique exponentially and continuously. Bold takes drive engagement in sports media. That is not an opinion. It is the documented economic reality of how sports television and digital platforms generate revenue. A 10-second soundbite questioning Shedeur's arm strength circulates nationwide before the full scouting context behind that comment ever catches up. One cautious analyst comment about Deion's coaching style becomes 2 articles. 2 articles become debate segments with opposing voices assigned to each side. Debate segments generate social media reactions. Social media reactions feed back into the next morning's programming decisions. Soon, fans begin repeating phrases originally spoken by a single unnamed evaluator. That is how narratives gain traction. The Sanders name guaranteed the cycle ran faster and louder than it would for any other family in professional or college football. The combination of Deion's Hall of Fame status, Shedeur's draft profile, and the program's national visibility created a content machine that had no incentive to slow down. It is critical to be precise here, because precision matters in a conversation that can easily drift toward overstatement. There is no verified evidence that the NFL as an organization launched a coordinated campaign targeting Deion Sanders or Shedeur Sanders. No documented policy, no verified directive discouraging teams from selecting Shedeur in the draft. What exists instead is a pattern of public debate driven by commentators, insiders, and draft analysts. Cultural friction combined with high media velocity and an attention economy that structurally rewards extreme positions over measured ones. That is the environment the Sanders family has been navigating. Caution inside NFL front offices about managing a high-visibility rookie is not the same as conspiracy. Amplified media coverage is not the same as coordinated targeting. But from the outside looking in, when the volume of criticism never drops and the cycle never resets, the distinction between amplification and hostility can be genuinely difficult to feel in practice. That is the precise point where Emmitt Smith's message carries its deepest weight. He is not calling for the removal of scrutiny. He is not suggesting that Shedeur Sanders or Deion Sanders should be exempt from evaluation because of their last name or their legacy. There's a difference between breaking down game tape and building a narrative that sticks to a player before his professional career even fully begins. That distinction between legitimate football analysis and narrative construction driven by media economics is the line Smith has been drawing throughout this entire conversation. Evaluate the throws. Evaluate the pocket presence. Evaluate the leadership demonstrated inside the huddle under pressure. Measure Deion's coaching record against the conditions he inherited and the timeline he was given. Let the film speak and let development unfold naturally without a predetermined conclusion already embedded in the public conversation. Smith also addressed the broader generational shift that sits underneath all of this. Today's athletes build personal brands early in their careers. They communicate directly with their audiences through platforms that did not exist when Smith and Deion were playing professionally in the 1990s. They operate in a digital space where visibility is not controlled by television networks or newspaper columnists. It is self-generated, self-distributed, and self-sustained. That evolution makes certain traditional observers uncomfortable because it shifts the balance of narrative control away from institutional media and toward the athletes themselves. Judging modern players strictly through older personality templates may miss the bigger picture. The league grows with every era. The definition of what legitimate football leadership looks and sounds like has never been fixed, and it is not fixed now. Emmitt Smith's message is ultimately straightforward. The conversation about the Sanders family should stay grounded in evidence, context, and fairness. Everything else is noise, and the noise has been running loud enough for long enough that one of the greatest players in NFL history felt the need to say so directly.